Good day everyone, our group is assigned with the topic Learners with Difficulty Communicating. Some learners are observed to have difficulty communicating, either verbally expressing their ideas and needs and or in understanding what others are saying. Some may have a clinical diagnosis of a disability while others display developmental delays and difficulty in the speech and language domain. To have a clearer understanding of students who have difficulty communicating, we will begin with a definition of communication and its accompanying concepts. How learners with communication difficulties are identified, their learning characteristics, and how to help them manage and become successful in an inclusive setting.
Hello, good morning. This is Shalome Madronero, and I am here to help you relay the importance of understanding and knowing cases of students or children with difficulty in communicating. In order for us to have a clearer understanding and a view of handling students with difficulty in communicating, let us define first what is communication and the types of communication impairments and disorders later on. So here we have the different types of communication impairment and disorders. But first, let us define first what is communication. So according to Hayward, in the year 2013, communication is the interactive exchange of information, ideas, feelings, needs, and desires between and among people. Communication is also used to serve several functions, which may include to narrate, to explain, to inform, to request or giving commands, and even expressing one's feelings and opinions. Now, in communication, we have speech and language. How is speech different from language? Let us first define what is speech. So, speech is the expression of language with sounds or oral production. Speech is produced through precise physiological and neuromuscular coordination, such as number one, the respiration or the act of breathing. Number two, we have the phonation or the production of sound by the larynx and vocal folds. Number three, the articulation, in which the use of lips, tongue, teeth, and hard and soft palates to speak. These components are very effective for us to be able to deliver the communication. Now, what about the language? How do we define language? So language is used for communication. But without language, we cannot be an effective communicator. Language is a formalized code used by a group of people to communicate with one another. So for us, Boholanos, we have our own dialect, our language used for communication. And it is primarily arbitrary. It is according to Hayward in the year 2013. People decide on symbols, their corresponding meaning and rules that make up language. And in language, we have 5 dimensions, and let us now describe its different form. So we have the first dimension, we have phonology. Next, we have morphology. We have syntax, we have the content, we have the use of pragmatics. Now, what do you mean by these 5 dimensions of language? Let us define them one by one. Now, the first component of language is phonology. What do we mean by phonology? Phonology, according to description, it refers to the sound system of language. A phoneme. Phoneme is the smallest unit of sound within a language. Now let us consider the example given here, the word dog. So the word dog has three phonemes. We have the d, the o, and the g, dog. How about another word, bean? The word bean has four phonemes. Namely, we have the b for letter B, e, n. So those are the sound system that composes the word beans. Now let's move to another component of language, which is morphology. What do we mean by morphology? According to description, morphology of a language refers to the smallest unit of language that has meaning and which are used to combine words. The sounds, the syllables, or the whole words are examples of morphemes. I'm not anymore going to dig deeper since this is quite familiar to most of us. Let us now consider another component of language, which is syntax. What do you mean by syntax? Syntax is the system of rules governing the meaningful arrangement of words. As for adverbs, adjectives, there are several rules that we need to follow as far as the arrangement of words is concerned. So syntax also includes grammar rules. For instance, this sentence, ready, get for the exam. It does not make sense, right, until we arrange it in the right sequence in this way. Get ready for the exam. So that's it. That is another component of language that for us, especially educators, really matters. Now we have another component of language, which is the semantics. What do you mean by semantics? So semantics refers to the meanings associated with words and combination of words in a language. This also includes vocabulary, concept, concept development, or even the connotative meanings of words and categories, or even the denotative meaning of the specific words. Next component of language is pragmatics. So pragmatic is revolving around the social use of language, which is knowing what, when, and how to communicate and use language in specific context, in a specific environment, and in a specific person. We have three kinds of skills in using pragmatics, which are number one, using language for different purposes. Example, what are those language uses in different purposes? We use different language in narration. We use different language in explanation, in requesting, or even giving commands, right? How about the second one, which is changing language according to the context? This context could be our tone, our language, our uses of language when we are talking to a peer, to our friend, or it also changes when we are talking to a professional, to our instructor. So there is really some difference in which we use our languages according to the person whom we are talking to, or even to our environment. The third skill is following rules for conversations and storytelling, in which examples of this are the talking turns, the rephrasing when unclear, how to use facial expressions, and even the eye contact. So, experientially speaking, I am handling students with special needs. So, and they are mostly autistic students. And autistic students have this difficulty in communicating, especially when it comes to writing essays or writing letters. Now, I would like to give this letter written to me by my student as a birthday card. So let us consider this as an example in which we can see some errors. If we are to critique it, if we are to examine it according to the semantics, pragmatics, according to the different components of language, I would like to um, just highlight this last sentence. If we are to examine this one, right, we know that the sequence of adjectives, adverbs, even the pronouns are incorrect because they do not know how to. They have difficulty in yeah in constructing sentences. But of course, it is up to us how we understood the message. Now let us consider this last somewhat like sentence. He said, I was hopefully kindness and very obedient. So if we are to understand it according to our own context, it is quite confusing. How do we understand such a sentence? But since cases like them have this difficulty in communicating, I bet that the sender of this letter wanted to emphasize that hopefully Atimae, as the receiver of the letter, would continue to be kind and continue to be obedient as the sender of the letter perceived her to be. So yeah, that's one of example of those students with difficulty in communicating. If you are to examine the the Filipino term wrong grammar, diba? So anyway, so that's it. So that is like the overview of the case of student with difficulty in communicating. Let us define more of specific terms associated in this case, difficulty in communicating. And that is to be reported by our next reporter.
So again, those are the definition as well as the different components of language. And now let us proceed with the next topic, which is the, the speech impairment and language disorders. Knowing these terms is necessary to understand the different disabilities that are associated with communication disorders, namely again, speech, impairments, and language disorders. Now, what is speech impairments? So speech impairments are common disorders such as stuttering. So if we say stuttering, parang nauutal or speaking the word again and again, so that is stuttering. Impaired articulation, so not really good articulation, and language or voice impairment. Now, we have here the types of speech impairments. We have the first one, articulation disorder. The second one is the phonological disorder. The third one is the fluency disorder. And the fourth one is the voice disorder. Now let us know what are those. Okay, let's start with the articulation disorder. So articulation disorder, a child is unable to produce a given sound physically. So as we remember, Ms. Madronero reported the previous topic, which is the components of language. It is really given that we need to to give sound physically by our throat, by our lips, by our palates and our tongue, right? So in here, the articulation disorder, a child is unable to produce a given sound physically. So severe articulation disorder may render a child's speech unintelligible. Examples are substitutions. So if we say substitutions, instead of saying blue, the student or the child will just say boo. So she substitute the blue into boo, since boo is quite easy to pronounce or to enunciate, right? Next, we also have the omissions, distortions. So the student or the learner or the child, specific child with this disorder, distort those words. So, for example, lollipop, and the child with that disorder will just say lipop, right? So she distort the word, and additions of speech sounds. For example, again, I have here let's say we have the sentence, I want a blue lollipop. So the child will say, I want a blue lollipop. So like it is different. A child with articulation disorder and a child which is unable to speak because of her age is different. Just like for example with my baby or with my daughter. So she's still 1 year and 6 months, so it's very understandable that she cannot articulate clearly. But those with the age of 5, 6, 7 yet can't articulate the words correctly, that in that case we can say that that child has articulation disorder. So we also have, can I get 3 bananas? Instead saying those phrase or those question, the child with this disorder can say, me say, an I T nanas. So it is really different with the right words, with the right wording. Okay, so that is again articulation disorder. Next, we have here the phonological disorder. If we say phonological again, phonetics, from the word phonetics, study of sound. So a child produces multiple patterns of sounds errors with obvious impairments of intelligibility. There is also inconsistent misarticulation of sounds. For example, sometimes a child is able to articulate it, but not in other words. So we have here, that pie is good, for example. And the child will just say, cat pie is good. Cat pie is good. So it's really different with the right wordings, isn't it? So a phonological disorder occurs when a child struggles to understand the sound system and the rules surrounding speech. So this is usually something most children achieve naturally. However, children with good phonological disorder may need therapy to be taught how to use their sound system appropriately. So if you know someone who has a phonological or disorder, so they must don't worry or don't feel pity to them, because there is still a way to address that disorder. Next, we also have here fluency disorder. So I know someone who is already at the age of 18 or higher who has this disorder. So it is not really necessary for children or for a child. Okay, so again, fluency disorder, difficulties with the rhythm and timing of speech. Stuttering again. So stuttering is, in Tagalog term, is nauutal. Is an example marked by rapid-fire repetitions of consonants or vowel sounds, especially at the beginning of words, prolongations, hesitations, interjections, and complete verbal blocks. Okay, for example, we have here, I want there's a block. For example, I want banana. Instead saying that directly, the student with fluency disorder can say, may say, I want banana. Okay, so there is no fluent. It is not fluent at all. So there's no fluency in his or her sentence, right? Another one in the that is the example for the blocks. And for example, in the prolongations, we have I want a banana. So there's so too much prolong, right? So sobraan ra ka prolong, right? We also have repetitions. For example, I want a banana. Okay. Medyo kukuan. Pero that's the example. I also know some of them personally. When he speak naa diha si mana ana siya. So maybe he has an fluency disorder. All right. When you have fluency disorder, it means that you have trouble speaking in a fluid or a flowing way. You may say the whole word or parts of the word more than once or pause awkwardly between words. So this is known as stuttering. You may speak fast and jam words together and say often. Okay, right? This is called cluttering. Okay, again, that is fluency disorder. We also have here the voice disorder. So these problems with the quality or use of one's voice resulting from disorders of the larynx. So voice may be excessively hoarse, breathy, or too high pitched. So I know you know someone, or even me, I know someone when she tried to speak, maybe it is out of her control, but her tone or her speech was very high. So I don't know if that's her kind of speaking, but maybe she also have this what we so called voice disorder, right? For example of this, the phonation disorder, the breathness, kanang when you try to speak, there's a lot of breath or air when they try to speak, right? And a voice disorder is again is a change in how the voice sounds. So voice disorders in children are usually caused by excessive shouting or loud talking, because we know if a children, if mga bata pa kanang, they tend to shout, they tend to say the words with the highest pitch they can, especially if manggiaway na. So that is the one of the reason why there is a voice disorder. So what is the common cause of voice disorders in the children? So the common cause again of the voice disorder in the children is the result of phonotrauma. Phonotrauma. Phono from the word phonetics without PHONO. Phonotrauma or voice misuse, such as yelling again when they play. Next, we have here. Okay, so we are done with the types of speech impairments. So let's now tackle the language disorder. We have here language disorders involve problems in one or more of the 5 components of language and are often classified as expressive or receptive. So again, this is disorder. This is characterized by persistent difficulties in acquiring use of language that result from deficits in comprehension that include reduced vocabulary. Okay, so limited sentence structure and impairments in discourse that limits a child language, a child functioning, right? To receive a diagnosis of language disorder, the difficulties must not due to an accompanying medical or neurological condition and other developmental disability, right? So we have mentioned that this was classified by 2, the expressive or receptive. Now let's understand, or let's learn what is this, what are those. So we have here expressive language disorders. So if we say expressive language disorders, this is the interferes with the production of sorry, naputol siya. So this is the interfere with the production of language. So this is the interfere with the production of language. So development, expressive language disorder signs and symptoms are actually using vague words like thing or stuff, having lower than average vocabulary, so having trouble finding words. So using if you have noticed someone that you thought if you have noticed someone that they say this in the Bisaya word, naasa tumoy sa akong dila, di ba? Kanang in that case, they are lack of these words. So they are having finding the right words. Okay, so that's the expressive language disorders. They cannot express themselves clearly for the reason that they don't have enough vocabulary to use. Okay, leaving out words, being late to begin talking, and speaking quietly because they cannot, again, they cannot express themselves. Now we also have here the receptive language disorder. So this is this interferes with the understanding of language. So if ganiha difficulties to express in here pod sa receptive language disorder, this is the trouble understanding the language. They have trouble grasping the meaning of the words that they hear and see. So this includes people talking to them and words they read in books or on signs. So for example, you give instructions to them, but they didn't get the instruction clearly. Okay, so it can cause problems with learning. It needs to be treated as early as possible. So here are the common signs of a receptive language disorder. First is tuning out when people talk, right? Trouble following directions because they didn't know that word. Actually, that's why they didn't follow the instruction. Next, trouble answering questions. Why? How can you answer the questions that you didn't know the word? How can you address? How can you answer that certain question if you don't really know the meaning of that question? Because that person is lack in vocabulary. Now, interrupting people who are speaking, asking people to repeat what they say. Okay, so these children with receptive language disorder keep telling us, can you repeat what they say? I can hear it clearly, but actually they can hear it, only that they didn't get it easily, right? So giving answers that are off, misunderstanding what's said, and not getting jokes. I know a lot of friends who didn't get my jokes. I hope they don't have receptive language disorder. I'm just kidding. But those are one of the signs that that kid or that child has a receptive language disorder. All right, so that would be all, and let's welcome the next reporter.
So, hi. Now we are delving into another part of this topic entitled, we have here identification of communication disorder. So this is about identifying communication disorder among students. So communication difficulty is oftentimes one of the most common red flag observed by family members, daycare workers, and early childhood teachers. That is why noted absence, delays, and difficulties in speech and or language from family members to consult their general pediatrician, who then makes referrals to developmental pediatricians and other specialists. Next slide, please. To screen children with communication difficulties, early childhood professionals use questionnaires and then developmental checklists. This is to determine the severity of the delay as compared with typical language development. It is important to note that although screening tools for speech language often identify those children who have speech language impairments, a screening is not a diagnostic evaluation and only suggests a child requires a more comprehensive assessment. So upon screening, a child may receive educational supports and accommodations to help address the delay. And if the difficulty is pronounced, referrals can already be made to developmental pediatrician and a speech and language pathologist. At times, referrals are also made to an occupational therapist if speech difficulty is resulting from motor problems. So how do specialists determine a speech or language problem? So a comprehensive speech and language evaluation components. We have slide please. We have here case history and physical examinations. So assessments always begins with the case history that provides the specialist the necessary background about the child's birth and developmental history, health record, achievement test scores, and adjustment in school. This also includes like family history of speech, language, reading, or academic difficulties. Then families' concerns about the child's language, and then speech, and then language and or dialects used in the home, including age of introduction of a second language as appropriate, then circumstances in which each language is used. Then it also involves teachers' concerns regarding the impact of child's language difficulties in the classroom. So these are very important now to identify any red flags that may be a factor or a contributing factor to speech and language difficulties. So specialist examines the child's oral peripheral mechanism, which includes the mouth, noting irregularities in the tongue, lips, teeth, palate, or other structure that may affect speech production. Next, we have hearing. Hearing is tested to determine whether an organic hearing problem is the cause of the suspected communication disorder. We all know that hearing sounds and we all know that okay. We all know that hearing sounds and words help children learn to talk and understand. And if a child with hearing loss, they are most likely to miss out on these sounds. It compromises one's ability to understand spoken language, and in children has the added effect of limiting children's ability to learn speech and language. This can cause problems not just in speaking and reading, but also school success and social skills. Thus, hearing impairment needs to be treated to develop speech and language skills. Next slide, please. So the third one, we have articulation. Articulation, it is a child's articulation skills are assessed, which includes identifying speech errors. Articulation, we all know that it is the process you must go through to produce sounds, syllables, and then words. If a child is unable to produce certain sounds or form particular sounds correctly, he or she might have articulation disorder, making the child's speech hard to understand and affect socialization and learning. Next, please. Next, we have phonological awareness and processing. Phonological awareness and processing skills provide the foundation for beginning to read in young children. Children with difficulties in processing sounds in language as well as hearings, segmenting, and then identifying phonemes in words may experience problems with expressive and receptive spoken language as well as in learning how to read. Next slide, please. Then the fifth one, we have the overall language development and vocabulary. Formal tests may be used to measure a child's overall language development and vocabulary, as these affect how well a child is able to understand and use language in spontaneous speech and in academic settings. So we have these so-called formal norm reference tests that are actually used to assess articulation, phonology, grammatical understanding, and production, and also pragmatic language use. So next slide, please. And then you have the sixth one, the language samples. And then we have the sixth one, assessment of language function. So language is used to serve several functions such as to request, name, imitate, ask, and then converse, among others. So as BF Skinner emphasized, how language is used rather than the structure and form of language. Next, please. So we have here language samples and observation in natural settings. This is about the language difficulties may also be identified through play-based authentic assessment, where a specialist plays with a child during which spontaneous speech and verbalizations can be elicited. Observations in natural settings such as child's home or school allows the specialist to sample the child's language in daily activities and observe parent and child interaction and communication as part of holistic assessment. Therefore, the collection of data from the authentic assessment tools and the formal measures provide a comprehensive picture of the speech language needs of a young child with a communication impairment. So we are done on how specialists identify the communication disorder among students. No, so next we will be tackling how important assessment in speech, language, and communication must take into considerations the student's cultural and language context, particularly for children growing up in bilingual environments. Next slide, please. So at this point, it is very essential to differentiate English language learners, or ELL, from children with diagnosed communication disorder. So when you say English language learners, or the ELL, they are proficient in their mother tongue, or L1, in both expressive and receptive language tasks. But the only thing about them is that they display difficulties in understanding and speaking the second language, such as English. While on the other hand, children with communication disorder has actually trouble communicating with others, which he or she may not understand or make the sounds of the speech. So these are the difference between the two, no? The ELL learners, and then we have the children with communication disorder. Next slide, please. And in a multicultural setting, knowing the child's first and second language aids teachers to language specialists to determine the possible sources of communication difficulties and plan for needed supports and interventions. Because if not, it is possible that an English language learner, for example, will be put at a disadvantage when his or her first language, or for example, the mother tongue, is not identified and assessed solely in the second language. So that ends my report. I will be giving the virtual floor to the next reporter.
Hello, good day everyone. I am G. Marie Lianos, and for my topic, I will discuss about the learning characteristics of learners with communication disorders. Learners with communication disorders, they often struggle in different settings like their homes or in school and in community. So next slide, please. Here are the language difficulties that learners with communication disorders often have. So, for expressive language difficulties, so we all know that expressive means when they talk, they have limited vocabulary, incorrect grammar or syntax, expressive repetition of information, and difficulty in formulating questions. So, um, for expressive language difficulties, the way they communicate, that are most of the struggles that they have. And for receptive language difficulties, receptive means by the way they listen or they interpret information. They struggle in following oral directions, understanding humor or figurative language, especially that figurative language are hard to understand, comprehending compound and complex sentences, responding to questions appropriately. So, next slide, please. Children with communication disorders may also experience behavioral difficulties. So, how can we relate communication disorders to behavior of the children? And it is because children with communication disorders, they struggle to express through communicating. That's why most of these children resort to physical aggressions or um, bad behaviors. So, for example, a 5-year-old child with expressive language disorder may resort to grabbing toys and hitting peers who try to take the toy he was playing with the day before. So, how is that? Next, please. Because typically developing children or normally typical developing children will be able to say, may I please borrow? So if normal children, may I please borrow, or it's my turn now. However, children with communication difficulties may not be able to utter this accurately because naman sila difficulty in communicating, and instead they resort to using actions resulting to physical aggression. Thus, it is essential that teachers and professionals take this into considerations when working with children with communication disorders and difficulties. And that is how communication disorder is related to behavioral disorders, because they are not able to communicate or express their thoughts. That's why they resort to physical aggression. Next, please. So, according to Greg 2016, such feelings of frustration may even become worse when peers or adults are unable to understand them. So, understanding them is the key to help them. It's the first step to help these children with communication disorders so that their condition will not become worse. Next, please. So let us remember that despite these language difficulties, children with communication disorders are known to have their own strength and abilities. This can be understood using the theory of multiple intelligences by Gardner in 1983, cited in Armstrong 2012. So, as we remember the story of Ishan in the Every Child is Special movie, even though Ishan is not good in math or in language, he was good in art. So that's why, even though some children have communication disorders, they still have their own strengths and abilities. So that is can be supported by theory of multiple intelligences. Next, please. So also, according to Gardner's theory, children may have difficulties in different areas or domains. So that's what I stated earlier, which makes it necessary for parents and teachers to provide opportunities for such strengths and abilities to be displayed. So I will go back to Ishan again in that movie. As we can remember, his teacher was the one who helped him to display his abilities and strengths despite his communication disorder, like he cannot write or he cannot read accurately. because we all know that even though children is not good in that particular area, he or she still has a specific area which he or she can excel. Next. So children with communication disorders may have limitations in the linguistic and interpersonal areas, but may possess good spatial, musical, and bodily kinesthetic abilities. So in other words, we cannot judge a child if, for example, he does not communicate well, because he or she may excel in other areas. Like Ishan, excel in arts. He is very good in creating artworks and drawings. Next, please. So, as parents, teachers, and practitioners, knowing a student's strength and highlighting such abilities in an inclusive classroom is as important as knowing and understanding his or her communication disorders. So, we must, as a future teacher, we must examine each of our students' abilities and strengths. We must not judge him for his or her communication disorder. Rather, we must understand each of our students so that we can highlight or we can develop each of their abilities and strengths in the classroom. So I guess that's all for my report, and thank you for listening.
Hello everyone, maadjong adlaw. This is Jeremy Ayuban Lariosa, the last one to report. So before anything else, no, we had already unlocked, unraveled some information, like we discussed the definition of language, the speech, and we are being thrown some disorders, no, especially the communication. So let's proceed. Are you ready, everyone? Ready na ba ang tanan? All right, let's get started. So first, we have the general educational adaptations. Different strategies and accommodations may a level of playing field for children with communication difficulties or disorders. And this portion or section will discuss the use of universal design for learning, or UDL, and practical tips to be used in the classroom. So first, we have here the universal design for learning. So the use of UDL in the classroom allows children to learn information, demonstrate understanding, and stay engaged in multiple ways. So, for example, multiple ways, it's means of presentation, it could be expression and engagement. And it is a great challenge for us future educators what learning materials, what learning resources that will be used in all the students, knowing that they have different capacity, different level, no? And it is a challenge to us to produce a learning materials which is not biased and friendly to all so that no one will be left behind. And it is our responsibility as future teachers to instill information to all our students. And all the given examples earlier talks about children which were 1 to 5 or something like that. For Elena's example, her daughter, no, 1 and 6 months, and the rest 5 to 8, no. But in this case, let's put ourselves in a situation that we are already in a mecca where, I mean, we are already in high school, having our future students, no. So mag-focus ta nga na nata sa high school. So let's say in junior high, grade 7, they are 13, no, 13 to 15. Or if we were be assigned sa senior high, so 18 and above or 17 and above. So it's really difficult to us teachers what are the things to be done. But since we are already bombarded with information, what are the strategies and ways to cope up with those uh with those plights? So uh we will get or we will help them to get the zenith of their success, no? And of course, in teaching and learning practices, as well as assessment, should be presented in different modalities, no? Dili kay mo focus lang ta sa reading. No. Since we are in the advent of technology, we can use the TV or the projector for the visual, auditory for if there are students who will grasp information easily through their ears, then why not? No, we can use the auditory, the kinesthetic, motor, or the tactile, di ba? So this means that lessons are presented through various means using pictures, pwede kaayo, videos, and hands-on experimental learning, and not solely on reading, no, na approach of reading like more tag mga spoon feeding rata kalingaw, no, or teacher method, no, teacher directed discussion, or like merely reading lang, but in enhancing those students who have difficulties in communication, then as a teacher, we need to do our very best in order for them to grow, in order for them to, no, there's an improvement. If daily totally 100%, at least there is an improvement, and there is something that we do that can compensate what's lacking on them, di ba? And in presenting learning activities in this manner gives our future students or our students with communication difficulties or disorders the opportunity to use their strength and stronger modalities to compensate what I've said earlier, compensate for their weaknesses and a chance to be successful in an inclusive classroom. Since their weakness or their weakness is the communication, the enunciation, the pronunciation, the fluency, the comprehension, understanding, since that's their big problems kay daghan kaayo proficiency, di ba? And we are talking about English because we are major in English. So we are talking about English. So perhaps yes, they have difficulty in speaking English, the L2, because yeah, it's really hard, especially that we are not that uh given by the or enough knowledge about English, no. So in acquiring L2, it's very difficult. That's why there are another ways on how to close the hole, to closing their strength so that their weakness will be compensated and they have the chance to be successful in an inclusive classroom. So if you are talking about inclusive classroom, there are students who have problems with communication, problems with socializing, or all the discussions or all the disorders being discussed earlier, receptive or whatsoever. So it's really hard, no? It's really hard. It's really a challenge. Imagine it's really a challenge to us future teacher if nanata sa real life situation. Yes, somehow right now we can give some tips, we can give what ways to be done, but for me it's really difficult. But for sure, if we are eager to impart knowledge, if we really love our students, we really love our profession, then there is no reason to say nga, oh, dili jud na ako kaya, pasagdan na ng estudyante ha. Maybe I'll just focus to those students nga mga bright lang noon, pasagdan na ng aning mga dili kaadyo ka mao. No, no, no. As teacher, there is fairness, no? There is na equality in teaching and giving information. So second, we have the practical tips for the classroom. In addition to using the universal design learning, there are practical tips and techniques that teachers can use to provide students with communication difficulties to support they need in order for them to be successful. Yes, what I have said earlier, that it's our responsibility, teacher, at tuwaan dyan ng uh, uh, panubagon kung unsay angay buhaton in order for our students to no apin na to build confidence in talking. So there are ways not to help them stand on their own. Kay if anybody guys, if yes, given nga na sila weaknesses, and of course their classmates can see that weaknesses, no, kay they are in one classroom, and that's the start of bullying, di ba? Mabully na, like asa man siya, uy, di mo nakahilwas, nanay mga sumay-sumay, kay sige magkamambol, sige magka-slaughtering, no, ang sa kasadyante. But as a teacher, we need to support, no, like let's cheer our students the best that they can. So there are some tips, no, on how to deal with that kind of situation. And the following list, next please. So the following list provides practical suggestions that teachers, or we teachers, future teachers, can use in the classroom. And these suggestions are best implemented in classroom that promotes a supportive and respectful culture, one that acknowledges and accept diversity and allows accommodation for learners with difficulties. No, always remember this, future teachers, classmates. The ROA, the middle name of our former president Rodrigo Duterte. ROA, respect for R, openness for O, and acceptance for A. No, what I have said earlier, different students, different demeanor, different behaviors, different characteristic, different ways on how to acquire information. Like it's sagol, tanan, diverse. So as a teacher, we need to acknowledge, we need to accept, we need to respect. Okay, some of the teachers, okay, section 1, bright tanan. Okay, section 1 ni ka mao na jud ni kaayo. No. Do not put your judge directly. Forget section 1. All of them are good in communication, as what Jill Llanos had discussed. No, there are different uh the Howard Gardner, what you call that one, the what you call that one, she the Howard Gardner, I forgot the term. It's the principle of Howard Gardner. A multiple intelligences. Yeah, we have different intelligences, and we have no right to judge directly. No, there's a saying na do not judge the book by its own cover unless you already read the content. No, just try to understand, just try to listen, be a receptive teacher. No, dili ta mag-assume nga sila tanan bright ani nga lugar. Perhaps there are some, but dili jud totally tanan. And same with ours. We are majoring in English, and not everyone can speak fluently, but they are good. They are good in creating craft. They are brilliant in writing activities, writing essays. Though they cannot express well, but on the other side, they have the power to connect. No, but yeah, as a teacher, no, as a future teacher, we need to master English because it is our field. And in future kung na nato sa atong future job, please calm, dili ta magpataka-taka og bully kay ang teacher di dapat mo bully kay ngano, we are the epitome sa classroom, no? We are the epitome of hope, epitome of success, epitome of itong kambandura gani guys. We are the model, no? We are the model of the students. So what are the tips? So we have two tips here. First one is some of the tips on niya, but na two nga gihatag. Allow the child to sit near the teacher and the blackboard away from auditory and visual distractions such as the window and the door. If magisod kini nga sa kaestudyantehha, para sa teacher kay if there are clarifications or baffles regarding the topic, then he can ask the teachers to explicitly understand the topic, no? Mga ways na siya. Second, get the child's attention before giving directions. Like, imo ba siyang doon nga, oh, mo ato ang kuan, okay ba ka? Or relax sa stay put sa ta, kay I will give the instruction na sa magpuyo, or call the child's name or use a pre-arranged signal, or Elena, magpuyo na kay magkuan na ta, or tap the table, imo bang pukpuk ko ng table so that everyone or katong mga naay mga disorder can their attention will be convert, no? And to help the child or our students to focus and listen to the directions. So these are some of the tips on how to compensate the disorders of our students. And for me, upon reading the content and upon analyzing all of this information, I can say that being a teacher is really hard, no? And I do hope and pray that each of the school in the Philippines have this friendly, or I mean the government can provide learning materials, learning resources that everyone can experience, no? Like dili na problema ang teacher because it's already funded, it's already there. And like we have that full time to teach na kay dili pa man ta mangita, oh, what learning materials naman sa daw, what resources kay if naa namang good, like largo na if kita teachers, di ba, it takes time, another burden na po sa teacher. But lagi sa ang giinga-ingon pa nako, it's our responsibility, it's our duty. But I do hope and pray also nga ang government can see this problem bitaw sa institution or sa system, so that those individuals who have difficulties in communication, in the auditory, tanan nga disorders, kanang kuan bitaw guys, ma-solve siya. And we have an interactive, meaningful, prolific understanding. And my conclusion, or as a final, what I can affirm what Jill Lanas had stated na we don't have the right to judge that particular person who has the disorder, because we don't know that he has something to offer. Perhaps it needs some some push para ipakita bitaw na, no? We need to dig deeper kung unsa gajud na. So dili ta magpa largo-largo og judge nga aka na siya bulok man na kay di man fluent in English. Aka na si Jack kay mag-utal-utal man na, so di na nato paapilon aning speech choir, di nato paapilon og oration, di paapilon og gestures. Same with me, I can really affirm also because when I had my senior high, I mean in my high school, I cannot speak fluently or eloquently. Sige ra kog mumble, sige kog stammer, magamar ako og mga kanang mannerism nga na, but some of my classmates judge me, or even my teachers na, mag-English ka, hindi ka college nimo. But I just took all of those as a challenge for me to grow na. And I hope as a future teacher also, ingana pa tong buhaton nga, let's challenge our students in a sense nga maka-learn sila, dili pa nang i-challenge nato nga ato silang i-down bitong nga wakay lami. Yes, ma-challenge sila pero negative thought na iyang pagkuha nila. Unlike sa i-challenge niya to in positive way nga, dapat maningkamot ka kay kani bitaw nindot jud nimo, makatabang jud nimo kay babi taron we are now in the 21st century, and the one of the requirements no in applying job or in having a conversation is a well comprehended communication, di ba? Ingana no. So I think that's the end of my discussion. And I do hope and pray nga each of us has gathered and grasped some information on how to solve, on how to cope up uh, communication disorder. And I do hope also that the tips being given will be used in real life situations. So thank you so much for listening, everyone, and have a good day.